In episode 46, we talked about hugelkultur, and we talked about how what I was doing was just leaving some oak and hickory, beech, walnut, those type of trees, leaving those behind so they wouldn't get, so I wouldn't cut them down, so they would obviously produce all of the protein from the nuts in the fall, and the pigs could get access to them. Now where I am right now is outside of my pig pasture. The pigs don't have access to this area. So as I come through here, I see, I've got a nice shell bark hickory here. I got a shag bark there. I've got oaks everywhere. So it's an opportunity to just walk around and see what you have here as far as acorns go. Now, I'd mentioned that I pay the boys usually $5 a bucket to fill them up. And as they get older and wiser, it's tougher to convince them to do so. It's sometimes relegated to me being out here picking up a nice hickory nut. So the thing you look at, obviously the obvious conclusion I've come to, of course, is feeding this to my pigs. But actually with acorns and with hickory nuts, acorns in particular, because you get more out of it, you can actually feed those to chickens. Now you may be wondering, how in the world can a chicken eat an acorn? How can it peck through that and bust that wide open? Well, I'm going to show you. Okay, so I'm here, yeah, of course I'm here, right underneath a bunch of white oaks. Right behind the camera is a very big white oak that kind of hangs out over my skeet range. And then there's a big white oak here, there's there, that's a hickory, another hickory. But nice little collection of white oak here. And even with as much browsing pressure as we get from the deer, they're still not able to eat all the acorns. So you can just see I'm picking them up, just sitting in one spot here, just as fast as I can pick them up. I could get a nice little collection of acorns. So yeah, if you've got young kids, you got a lot of spare time, then you can go out and do this. And why would it make sense to feed your chickens? Well, obviously acorns are a good source of protein, and protein is what chickens need, especially this time of year, as the bugs and those things are going away. They're getting less protein from that. They get a lot of calcium from the bugs as well, but they're getting less protein from those things. And of course, they need protein to produce eggs. If they're your meat layers, they lay meat. If they're meat chickens, broilers, then of course you need even more protein there, so they put on the weight and justify being on the farm until you can butcher them. So taking the time to collect these, again, not a lot to it into foraging in this sense, so that's where you maybe want to recruit some of your younger help and get them involved. But I'm flying solo this evening, so I'll just collect a little bit here and I'll show you what we're going to do with them next. All right, so just in the little time that I've been around this one oak tree here, I'm just indiscriminately picking it up. I've got the bottom of this bucket covered. And if I would go another 5 or 10 minutes, I could probably get a couple inches worth of acorns here. But, so the obvious question may be, well, wait a minute, Troy, don't you have to have, hey, look, there's a hickory nut right there. Don't you have to have a lot of property, a lot of oak trees to justify doing all this? Well, yeah, obviously oak trees produce acorns. But one thing to consider, even if you're urban or suburban, there's all these parks, and a lot of these parks plant these ornamental oaks. And so these oaks you see are huge. They're kind of a red oak, a pin oak type. We get nailed by acorns as they're coming through the trees there. They plant these in these parks, and these things get huge. And usually it's a nuisance for the park, the groundskeepers. In fact, it's actually a liability. Some of these parking lots, a buddy of mine was just telling me that a lady in their parking lot where these, at their office, where these big oaks were planted, she goes out and it's like walking on marbles, and she slips and breaks her ankle. So liability for the company there to be responsible for her broken ankle because of groundskeeping, not keeping the acorns picked up. So if you have a situation like that, you've got a park, you've got a local business, the park, you could always just go take your bucket and start collecting them, unless they have specifically posted guidelines about collecting these type of things. It's not like you're cutting a tree down, you're just collecting the fall off from it. But if it's a local business, just ask them, hey, would you guys mind if I swept up the acorns? I'm sure they wouldn't bat an eye. if you're going to help them keep their area cleaned up. So if you look at that, you look at some of those ornamental oaks, man, they drop thousands and thousands of acorns. And if they're laying on asphalt, that may be something you can go with a broom and a dustpan and just sweep them up. So there's a way to get acorns if you don't have the property or you don't have enough oak on your property. Or, like we have sometimes in West Virginia, some of the oaks don't produce because we had a late frost and it killed the blooms, so that oak got skipped for the year. Now here out where we live, we kind of live in our protected valley, so when we had a late frost, it really didn't damage the trees here because they hadn't bloomed yet. They were far behind, so ours kind of stay behind. They're last to bloom out and last to get their leaves. So we have a plethora of acorns. You know, again, thinking about the allocation of your time, this may not be the best allocation of your time, but if you have an opportunity, you got some downtime, this time of year, it's nice to get out in the woods, enjoy this cool weather, and just enjoy an evening stroll and be able to do this. Or if you have younger people, you have kids, you can involve them, maybe reward them. What I like to do, if I have a teenager that's being insolent, I send him to the woods. Doesn't happen very often, but that's a much harsher punishment than taking away some privileges or doing something like that. It's, hey, go out in the woods and pick up acorns. So yeah, worth going out and collecting them. Okay, so I have enough in my collection here that I can show you what to do with them next. Now again, if you're going to go through all this hassle, the small amount that I have in my bucket probably not necessarily justifiable to do. But you know, I've got enough here that I can show you what we're going to do for feeding the chickens. Now, one little side note, maybe this is a bushcraft type thing. I can't stop picking them up now. It's kind of addicting after a while. Acorns actually, you know, you think about an acorn, it can be ground up. When it's dried out, it can be ground up into a powder. You know, if you look, do a little research in history, you see that a lot of homesteaders would actually grind these up for personal consumption. Now, if you've ever, you probably haven't, I'm probably the only dummy that ever has, but if you buy ground up acorn like guys used to put out for their deer, and you decide, hey, I'm going to taste a spoonful of that because it's powder, how bad could it be? You may realize just how bitter an acorn can be. So what has to happen, and again, this we won't get into this detail, that's a subject for another video, but the key with an acorn in an oak, of course, it has a lot of tannic acid. So those tannins are what make these really, really bitter. Deer loves them for some reason. God made their stomachs, I guess, and their tongues to really like tannins. But you know, this tannic acid makes these pretty much unpalatable for us. So what you have to do is you have to actually steep them, and you steep them in water a couple times after you've ground them up, and it helps release those tannins. But we may get into that down the road. I've got a buddy that actually makes acorn flour along with some other things there, so maybe we'll get him involved and detail that. But that's an opportunity there if you want to actually eat your acorns yourself, you can do so. Maybe make acorn biscuits or acorn bread. Sounds nuts, I know. Okay, so once you've got your collection of acorns, you've got the bucket of acorns. Again, I recommend using a much larger amount to make this worthwhile. What tools do you need to prepare these acorns for your chicken's consumption? Well, I use an old feed sack. We have these polypropylene feed sacks, burlap, whatever. Any type of bag would work. We're going to dump our nuts into the bag. Now all we need is a tool to crush these to prepare them for our chickens. So obviously you can use quite a few things. You can use a large rock, you can use a hammer, you can use a mallet, and you can use a millstone if you have one. What I like to use is a 2015 Chevy Silverado. Now the reason why I'm doing that, of course, is wide tires. We're just going to run over them. So let's crush some nuts. So again, with a larger bag, you're probably going to need more than one pass. I'm simply going to lay my acorns down here in front of my truck. Now, if you don't have a Chevy Silverado and you're using a Ford, be careful. You may tear up your Ford. So we'll just give it a go here. This is very dramatic, isn't it? The sound of crushing nuts. Back up for good measure. Sweet sound of success. Starting to sound pulverized. Alrighty. So if we check this out, we can see we've got some busted up acorns. So those busted up pretty good. Now, if you really wanted to pulverize them, obviously you could use a hammer or whatever. If you really want to pulverize them into dust, then you'd have to let them dry out more. A lot of just split in half. You need to let them dry out more, and as they dry out, of course, they have a propensity to split more. Like that one didn't even bust. So now that they're busted up, they're something the chickens will actually work on. So you can see, like this acorn here, where it's fractured and split apart, the chickens will pick all of that meat out of that nut. Actually give them a little something to do there, something to check out.